Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Cloud Migration Masterclass. I'm your host today, Matt Urbanowitz, and I have with me Pat Cannon and Darryl Arning. We will get to a more formal introduction slide. But at first, I just wanted to remind everyone that if you do attend 3 of the live sessions over the course of these 2 days of our Cloud Advantage Virtual Summit, you will be entered to win amazing prizes. Ray-Ban Meta Glasses, Amazon Echo Show, or a 4-pack of Indiana Fever box tickets. So please do keep that in mind. We'd also like to say thanks to our participating partners, LotoCloud, Geico, NetSource One, Nutanix, Ampere, Shape Blue, and theCUBE. And now on to our event. Again, Cloud Migration Masterclass, how to plan, execute, and optimize, tips and tricks from the field. We'll start with Pat.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Matt. Pat Cannon, Field CTO for US Signal. Been with the organization coming up on 13 years. And during that time, had the opportunity to assist a lot of customers with migrations into US Signal from a variety of different source locations. So definitely excited to share, what we've learned over that time period.
Excellent. Darryl?
Hello, I'm Darryl Arning. I've been with US Signal almost 10 years now. I've been in this role as professional services engineer for about 8 years. So a big chunk of that job has been doing migrations for customers, setting up disaster recovery, onboarding, etc. So very well versed in the migration game.
Excellent. Thank you. And I am Matt Urbanowitz. I've been with the company, like Pat, for 13 years, nearly 28 years in IT, about 20 of that in the services type industry, so resale or hosting, managed services, cloud co-location. Glad to be with everyone today. I think between the 3 of us, you'll get a variety of experience dating back to even such migration strategies as driving a storage array across town. Thankfully, we are beyond that now, and we won't spend much time on that. So again, we're glad to be with you here, and we'll move on to our agenda. Basically takes you through a chronological approach to virtual cloud migrations. First and foremost, you want to identify workloads that will migrate. We'll talk about cleaning out the attic or the garage, so to speak. And we're going to focus on, very importantly, how are you going to connect to this new environment? That will parlay into network design considerations such as internal IP addressing, always a hot topic, and then move into data protection. You gotta back things up, whether it's at old cloud, new cloud, etc. We'll talk about some of the tools and the processes we've seen or used over the years, and then the big event, the cutover. Generally, that parlays into a conversation around a phased approach versus a hard cut. But we'll start that off with kind of an open discussion around, and we like to call it a fireside chat. Talk about migration success, more high level. So I'll invite Pat and Darryl to chime in at this point.
Yeah.
Sure. Pat, you want to go? So every migration is totally unique. So everybody's environments are different. Everybody's needs and goals for migration are different. So really the most important thing at the beginning is just understanding where you're at and where you're trying to get to. So we're going to be collecting a lot of information from you, having a lot of discussions about the design, things that might be changing. So are you just trying to move the workloads and make them work the exact same way they did at their current location? Or are you looking to make some other changes to your overall environment at the same time? So like Matt alluded to, cleaning out the attic a little bit, maybe it's an opportunity to knock out some things that have been on the back burner. And usually it's a good time to clean house and take care of some of those things that maybe have been neglected.
Yeah.
Thanks, Darryl.
So Matt, I think, what comes up for me when I think about the variety of different migrations, and I was always pleased to see Darryl on the list of professional services engineers. If it was something that I was working with a customer on directly. Um, Darryl, how many migrations, or I guess just to quantify it from a VM standpoint, how many VMs do you think you've migrated during your time at Signal?
I'd say conservatively thousands of VMs, and somewhere in the hundreds for migrations.
Okay. Yeah, and my experience of those projects, when you think about all migrations not created equally, and what led up to positioning US Signal to perform those migrations, whether they were landing on our equipment from a hosting standpoint or on customer equipment, um, you know, the process that goes into managing these projects at US Signal. A lot of vendors will just give you a tool, and you're kind of left to your own devices to, plan and execute that migration. Um, Whereas US Signal, even post pre-sales, we share a lot of information with Darryl and the team on the nature of the workload, the objective of the project, like Darryl pointed out, and then full project management process, consistent touch points, managing to timelines. I think that's something for the audience to take away, is just understanding that they are kind of dynamic, they are unique, but assigning a methodology and overall processes and ways to measure those to make sure that the project is staying on track can be a benefit for migrations.
Excellent. It reminds me of a analogy. I have some friends that are into hot rodding who say going fast is easy. Going fast with air conditioning is the hard part. And for us, it's when we were going through some of our prep sessions around this, Darryl said it's easy to move a VM. It's hard to make it work like it's supposed to. So what makes a successful migration? Planning, planning, and planning. We have to think about things like, is the functionality of the environment expected to remain as is, or will there be changes? Will there be significant changes? So we have to understand, as a project team and a group of customers, how important it is to focus on communication. So those next two lines on the slide there, understanding how to work together and the importance of communication, those go really hand in hand. And those parlay into determining timelines and how important those are. And then finally, with regard to this presentation in general, as you can see, we're trying to keep it conversational. Yes, we have plenty of content to go through, but we've got a line back to the meeting organizers here who are watching the questions panel. We would love to hear from all of you attending as we move through. We've got questions from earlier teed up at the end, but we're very happy to interrupt as we move along. So Pat and Darryl, anything to add before I move on to the next slide?
Yeah, to kind of build on what you said. So understanding how to work together, having an idea of who all the key contacts are, having technical counterparts on our side and the customer side. So if you have a specific network guy, we're going to link you up with our network guy. We always have a network engineer attached to these projects. If you have gaps in your expertise, we like to identify that early and then see if there's somewhere where we can fill in those gaps. We have a lot of expertise here, and communication, of course, goes along with that too. So our project manager is going to be establishing a regular cadence of calls, project calls, and we're going to be in constant communication, setting deadlines, and then following up on that. So you're going to get some homework. We're going to get some homework. We'll try to get all that done as soon as possible so we can hit the timelines. And then that's maybe the biggest thing for a lot of these projects is establishing those timelines. So are there specific drop dead dates or expiration dates on the work? So do you have a lease at your current data center that is going to be up in 2 months and you absolutely have to be out by that point? We need to know that early on, and then we will work around that. So typically we can work faster than our customers can. So it's all about finding out where their timelines are and what their availability is, what the resources are, and then building that into our project plan so we can hit those milestones. So other things like, do you have licensing that's expiring on your hardware and you don't want to refresh? We don't want to see you push into a time where you're still running on unsupported hardware before you're able to migrate. So these are all early questions that we like to figure out early on.
Are there compelling events looming that we need to control for?
Exactly.
Excellent, thank you. All right. So the first part of the process, as we see it, is identifying the workloads. We talked about cleaning out the garage before the project, right? So we first want to review the inventory of everything that a given organization has, and then we want to ask the question, does this workload need to migrate? Do you want it to migrate? And then we move on to the question of eligibility. Is this a migratable workload? So for example, Microsoft, discourages is not even strong enough of a word. They will tell you flat out, do not migrate a domain controller. So the process there is you stand up a domain controller from template, you deploy a new VM, join it to the domain, promote it, sync it up. Migration is migration of a domain controller as is contraindicated, as they say in the medical profession. Similar story, not always as strict, but with database workloads, build new and migrate the database. It gives you an opportunity to refresh or upgrade your SQL operating code, for example. There's a similar story with operating systems in general. And then there are other non-candidates in this category. I'll leave it to Pat and Darryl to offer their take on this.
Yeah, so usually before we even have the project kicked off, sales has gathered the inventory of machines that you're looking to migrate. They've gathered some information about the environment. Usually, your standard Windows servers, those are good to go, with the exception, of course, of domain controllers, which we will assist you if needed to getting those up and running. So database servers, other servers that might be worth a review. So things maybe that have just been collecting a lot of dust and might not be worth migrating. So if you have a file server with a bunch of archive data on it that isn't really needed, you have to keep it for retention reasons, but it might not need to be accessed very often. You might think about breaking that off and putting it in a object storage or somewhere else. So again, the idea is to maybe look at it, cleaning your garage before you move, I think was the analogy we made. So usually before you move, you got to kind of sort everything out and put it in its spot, figure out, do I really need this, or have I just been leaving it here collecting dust? And then appliances, so, or other workloads that maybe you might not be able to move, or you just flat out can't move depending on compatibility. So if we're using an agent-based backup tool to perform the migration, a a lot of virtual appliances, most virtual appliances are black boxes. They don't give you any access to get in there and install an agent or any other tooling. So we have to account for those. Virtual desktop infrastructure, Citrix, things like that. Typically, you want to just build new, try to migrate those things. So we would want to plan for that. If you're continuing to go with that same solution, making sure we have an option for you where you could stand that up, or looking at solutions that we provide, maybe it's an opportunity to switch and just go with a managed solution through us. Fragile systems. So Lord knows I've seen some 2003 server boxes that, let's just say, were long overdue for being replaced. Things like that, and taking the opportunity to modernize the OSs. Whether you decide to do that ahead of migration, as part of the migration, or just wait until after the migration. To that end, I have migrated some very old VMs, and at least on a virtual hardware level, it will run, but no promises about whether it will run well or continue to run. So these are all things we look for as we review your environment.
I know on the topic of virtual appliances, there's also a hypervisor qualification step that needs to be considered. This is a few years ago now, when US Signal was in the process of adapting KVM as a hypervisor and or AHV, which is a KVM hypervisor. But in the years ago, Cisco virtual appliances, some of them would not run on KVM. Now that's changed quite a bit with the proliferation of the KVM hypervisor. Cisco in particular has been great about expanding multi-hypervisor support, but it is still something that we look at very closely early in the discovery and pre-sales process to say, okay, if you have virtual appliance, it's not just about what level of operating system are you at and will that be supported in the destination, but will this particular virtual appliance even run on the destination hypervisor if you are looking at a change from one hypervisor to another, one platform to another. And then not only will it run, but will it be supported by the application vendor? Because we've run into that scenario as well. It's just like, yeah, our team is very good at getting things to function, but we don't want to put our clients in a position of the ISV or the OEM, whatever you want to call them, saying, well, like, hey, congratulations on, excuse me, on getting our appliance to run on this such and such a hypervisor, but now we're going to use that as an excuse to not give support. Again, we've seen a lot of advancement from application vendors in that regard, but it's still a step we're definitely not ignoring.
Yeah, and that's why we like to do that as soon as possible. We have a best practices review where we look for any of these red flags for at least hypervisor compatibility. Will it run? But beyond that, there's things that we might not even have insight to. So I can think recently, I forget the firewall appliance type, but the customer was bringing their own firewall and was moving from VMware to KVM through Open Cloud, basically.
Yeah.
And part of that was it doesn't use OVFs or OVAs, so we had to get the compatible template from their vendor, they were getting the licensing through. Well, it turns out they had paid for licensing that is only on VMware and does not apply to a new environment. So we had to change gears and actually ended up buying managed firewall through us because they would have had to buy an entirely new license to be able to run it on KVM.
Okay.
And there's other considerations too beyond that. So maybe your application support team won't support it if it's running over a WAN versus a local LAN connection. So important things to keep in mind. And then we could work around it. That's the main thing. We can adjust the plan and come up with new solutions. We just need to identify things early enough in the process that it isn't too disruptive.
Yes, US Signal is very adaptable in that regard. Our services organization, and in working with our hardware VAR, our solution provider organization, we've done cloud migrations that involved virtual firewalls of the same platform, virtual firewalls of a different platform, and then even integrating physical firewalls with co-location integration services to make just about any different combination work. I like to say the difficult we can do, the impossible just takes a little longer.
Good analogy.
So we have kind of, I think the next slide is going to be network, if I'm not mistaken, which is good because that's kind of what we've been talking about here. So connecting to the new cloud, obviously we've touched on firewall and virtual appliance types of conversations, but Pat and Darryl, I'll give the two of you a comment, an opportunity here to chime in about network considerations in general.
Sure. Yeah. So, I think using it as an opportunity out of the gate to improve upon what exists today, right? So, I think we heard that earlier this morning in the keynote as well. If your network is not set up to service the new destination in a way that is going to be more efficient, more secure, then you're putting yourself at a disadvantage right out of the gate. So much like in the previous slide, identifying risk and then planning to mitigate for it. I think that's the name of the game here from a networking standpoint. And so that's what we typically dive into and encourage customers to look at. We've got, at our disposal many more arrows in the quiver as a network provider. So we can deliver private connectivity. We can pump up pipes on our end if we're, migrating workloads in over IPsec. If we're using it as an opportunity to modernize their approach to wide area networking and, even layer in more security services through Cato SASE. Those are all things that, we try to talk about in kind of the pre-sales and solution architecture phase.
Excellent, thank you, Pat. I like to use the phrase "down the hall." A lot of us, some of us still work in conventional IT infrastructure environments where the organization has a headquarters. You go to work there, and they have a server room or an on-premise data center. So you have the benefit of switched gigabit or better Ethernet to connect your client server applications to that server infrastructure. It's a very centralized model, and the performance for the network is generally very, very good because, again, you've got near zero latency, switched gigabit or better access to those. So when you entertain the idea of separating your back office IT infrastructure from the user community, if you're going to move it to a remote data center, you have to examine those client server applications very closely and make sure that they're not too old fashioned, because putting it on the other end of a IPsec tunnel or on the other end of an SD-WAN infrastructure or at the other end of a site-to-site tunnel, as good as wide area networking and internet bandwidth has been continuing to get, it still, in my opinion, can't really hold a candle to switched gigabit or better infrastructure down the hall. Now, fortunately, the pattern with applications in general has that they've become more cloudified, if you will. They've become very lightweight on the client side, and the application to database transactional processing is really taking place on that far side at the far data center infrastructure. If you look at, SaaS applications in general, all they're sending you across that distance connection are screen refreshes and accepting your mouse and keyboard inputs, and that's good. But we're still not there in terms of 100% of conventional IT applications, especially in the CRM and ERP space of that type of operating model, cloud friendly, very lightweight on the client side. So there is a good bit of testing that needs to be done in that regard. We do work closely with our clients to perform that type of assessment and testing on the front end before we commit to the migration project. And then kind of moving through the stack here, we need to look at, okay, in the new location, is that internet service robust? Is it full duplex? If not, how do we control for potential service performance impact if it is a asymmetric connection at the new data center, or more typically an asymmetric connection at your distributed workforce environment, right? So small business, home office, that's very typical to see an asymmetric type of connection. So if upload from the client side is going to be an issue, that's going to need to be tested and validated before you commit to a remote data center type of proposition. And then we kind of move the conversation to still within the realm of network considerations. What, if any, type of services from a network perspective are going to be added? Are you going to have leverage the opportunity to implement deeper, wider security type of services such as MDR, XDR, SIM, perimeter firewall upgrades and the like.
Yeah, and to that end, maybe consolidating. So if you're already getting those services from this vendor or that vendor, it is nice to have one phone number to call to get support on, everything from your network infrastructure down to your MDR, XDR, backup, network, everything. So one thing to take it away from you guys real quick is to just identify what's going to be left behind in these situations, because we can talk about moving a latency sensitive app to the cloud and maybe having to develop a remote app or remote desktop solution if it doesn't perform well over a WAN. But even if that's out of the way, you still have to think about it. If this is a corporate headquarters, you still have a lot of people working there. Are the servers you're moving actually already handling DNS, DHCP? How is that going to work once those servers have been moved off site? Or is it network hardware that's handing out DHCP addresses, things like that? How will those work once the other parts of that data center are gone? So we always have to account for that. Is the site getting totally evacuated? Account for what else is not going to be able to come over in the event that it is being fully evacuated. So we'd like to identify that early on as well. I feel like I keep saying identify early on. I don't think
you do, and you can't overstate it. It's so important.
Yeah. So how are remote users connecting? Are they using agent-based VPN? Are they just using remote desktop, public-facing remote desktop sessions, things like that? So we really try to really take a holistic view and really drill down into how an existing environment works and try to get any snags out of the way well before the migration. So I like to try to make it so the actual migration event shouldn't be that much work. We should be front loading almost all of this well in advance of the migration and getting it all out of the way to have as few moving parts as possible on the actual night or nights of that cutover.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Darryl. All right, folks, drum roll, please. Take a deep breath and brace yourself for the highly controversial next slide. This is a hot button issue. People have opinions. It's along the lines of networking, and it's the big question about internal addressing. Do we re-IP or do we not? We could probably spend a full hour on this topic. It's the quick hits on it are that if the source environment has got a lot of I call them Easter eggs, unknown dependencies based on IP addresses. And we still do see a lot of that, as much as we've all been encouraged over the years, like use DNS. It's just so simple in a lot of cases to tell this particular application. It even gets down to like embedded spreadsheets in certain organizations that are reaching out to a TCP/IP address. So do we want to ask our client at the front end, are you confident, if you're willing to go the new IP address route, that you're not going to have any unpleasant surprises, things breaking because they're looking for an IP address and now it's not there anymore. We did put together a quick T-chart here about the benefits of either, which we can hit on. But before we jump into that, I'll just give Pat and Darryl an opportunity to talk about the topic.
Yeah, I'd say it comes down to when do you want to do the work. So for the most part, you might get lucky once in a while and a customer has a fully segmented network at the source where they're coming from, where workstations are on one subnet, network gear is on another, your virtual infrastructure, your hosts, that's all on another subnet, and then your production servers are on their own subnet. That makes it really easy to keep the same IPs. You just change the route, pick up that network, and now it lives up at US Signal. Most of the time, we're not that lucky. Most people don't have that much foresight when building out their network. Maybe they grew a ton and just were started out on a single subnet. Everything's on one flat VLAN or network. So if that is the case, you're going to have to re-IP something at some point if you want either way you do it. So the question is, do you want to re-IP things ahead of time to make it so you can keep the IPs when you cut over on your migrating servers? Or do you not want to do that? Maybe there's too many things you'd have to touch, and you're going to re-IP the servers onto a new unique subnet up at US Signal. So you're going to have to usually do some work there. It's just a matter of when do you want to do that. Like you said, there's explicitly referenced IP addresses in various apps, and maybe, somebody set things up a long time before you and didn't document anything, and you just don't think you'll be able to go through and update all those things. So it's just safest for you to keep the same IPs once you migrate. Then we're probably going to have to do some work ahead of time to account for that. So
Excellent.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm interested, Darryl, in would you be bold enough to say there's a best practice in this space as it relates to re-IPing during a migration, or do you feel like it's just purely situational? So I think that's the thing that we always get thrown back. When this conversation comes up, is like, oh, well, what's the best practice? So I'm curious, from your experience, is there a best practice, or is it more situational in your experience?
I think it is situational. A lot of these things, it really depends on the use case. I think maybe a best practice would be that your network is carved out in such a way that keeping the IPs when you fail over is trivial. It yeah, it really depends. There's some benefits to doing it one way or the other though, like on this chart here. So if you are re-IPing things, it makes it easier to do your migration in chunks because you don't have to fail over an entire subnet worth of servers, and that actually lets you do it a little safer too. Because if you find during that migration that there something's not working right, we didn't account for an IP that was referenced somewhere, you can really easily just say, all right, we're going to abort. We'll figure out where that reference was, and then we can try it again some other time. And you didn't waste a, whatever 8 hour long maintenance window to find
Yeah,
out that
that are
that
hard
it's
to schedule and political in nature, honestly.
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
However, that does require extra time after the servers are moved and stood up to get into each of them, update IPs, update DNS if needed. But like it says, we can do it either way. And it really depends on what your resources are, when you would prefer to do that work of re-IPing, moving things around.
And then we don't want to forget there are external IP addresses too. Pat,
Yeah.
I know you had some content to share on that matter.
Yeah, so that's kind of a different consideration. Typically, customers aren't so fortunate to be able to keep their existing IP space. If you're a US Signal customer, obviously, we own that public IP space, and we can broadcast that from any of our connections, which does simplify things. But typically, we have customers moving from one provider maybe into our environment, and how do they handle that external facing connectivity, knowing that those blocks are going to change. So there's a variety of different tools out there. Cloudflare has an excellent one that also gets you some additional security features, because you're basically hiding the IP addresses behind the A record. So there's no way to directly try to DDoS those DNS entries. So you can use it as an opportunity to improve that as well and make the organization more nimble in the future. AWS has one too, Route 53, I believe is the name of it. But yeah, just kind of a different consideration. Customers large enough where they have their own ASN, we're able to broadcast those as well. So that helps. But yeah, just typically, Matt, I think the takeaway is there are options. We can help
Okay.
through those. But customers usually aren't as at an advantage to make that decision, in those circumstances.
But super ideal if they host with us in the first place. Really
Yeah,
gives them.
makes it really easy. Yeah, I mean that's, we can talk about that too when we get to kind of data protection.
Okay. And speaking of that, we should probably move along. We're getting a little tight on time.
Yeah.
It's a big
So
topic.
it is, and it's important. Real quickly, in my experience, we very seldom see use existing. That would involve typically a client that has co-location with us, and they're expanding into one of our cloud services in the same data center. In that scenario, yeah, we can cross connect you into your cloud environment, and it's very convenient. But overwhelmingly, what I see is a virtual data center migration into a new platform is going to also involve moving to that hosting provider's backup as a service platform. We've also got a variety of services we offer at the destination. So for example, on our Rely Cloud platform, we offer Nutanix snapshots, which is a great versatile tool for quick recovery. It's a great hedge against malware, but the data does remain on the platform. So we usually will pair that with a conventional type of backup solution. On Rely Cloud, that service is powered by Commvault. On our open cloud platform, we're generally using Acronis, which is also what we're using to migrate in many cases. But down at the bottom, you see there at the hosting provider service, it does offer the benefit to the customer of starting anew, maybe revisit some of your policy, and it offloads that burden of managing data protection to the provider. So it's a lot of times we hear the phrase, hey, I want to get out of the infrastructure business. I want to focus on my applications and my data, that which is specific and important to my organization. Lets you do the hero work and lets us keep the keep the lights on, so to speak. But you do often want to maintain a bare bones of the old solution for whatever long-term retention and archival you may be subject to. You want to keep some of that infrastructure around.
Yeah, we've kind of seen it all different ways.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the choice when customers think about just lifting and shifting or consuming infrastructure as a service, part of the benefit is that time to value for an improved security posture, right? Because we're segregating control plane and data plane from one administrative kind of care and control, and so choosing data protection that aligns with that as well, with that model as well, I think is what we typically advise customers on. So, not only does it help them save time, but it also can help them get to a more segregated posture as it relates to data protection as well.
Excellent. We'll advance to tools and process. We've listed the tools that we use. They're generally speaking specific to the platform destination that we've come up with. So for our open cloud migrations, overwhelmingly we're using Acronis to get our customers there. For ReliaCloud destination, it's Nutanix Move, because ReliaCloud is a Nutanix-based hosting solution. For Azure, as you might expect, Azure Migrate. And then, of course, VMware still relevant, and we're using Zerto in most of those cases. I think the two of you have more experience with most of these than me, so I'll open it up again.
Yeah. So it depends on what you have access to. If you can get an agent installed on a system, that's great. We can use a couple of different solutions for that. If there's hypervisor access available, that's always great too. That allows you to move appliances that otherwise you might not have root access to. Save you some time having to rebuild it. But we also have plenty in the pipeline coming. Open Cloud is only almost a year old now, so we're developing other tools for data protection, for migration. It's coming. So some of it we can talk about, some we can't yet.
So Matt, maybe let's have Darryl give us the cliff notes on, I think, which is our last slide, which is cutover. So I think we're getting close to our time here.
Close.
We are, yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So the decision of whether or not to cut everything over, all at once or in chunks is informed by those decisions about IP addressing, about maintenance windows. So when can your business afford to take the downtime needed to do the migration? Do you have vendors that need to be involved? So you have to do some coordination in terms of scheduling with third parties that, might not be us or you. So, you may find that you would prefer to do it one way, but there's limitations keeping you from being able to do that. Like I said, with scheduling or just downtime. But in either scenario, so we will identify the target dates we want to do that, and we start building out a migration checklist. So we call it a method of procedure document, and that will have the full inventory a mop that has the full inventory, everything that's moving, the exact procedures, and literally a step-by-step basis. We'll build that out specific to the migration. Network steps for if we're doing any network changes, we'll have our network resource on that call ready to go, knowing what changes need to take place, turning on VPNs, cutting over VLANs, shut, no shut type things.
Sure.
And then we will ask you to provide validation steps. So that's another really important part of this process. We can only get you so far, and at some point you'll have to take over the testing to make sure your applications, your end user testing, all of that we're not familiar with is going to actually work. So, and we're on hand for it the entire time. If you run
Yes.
into issues, we'll help troubleshoot through it. And then, of course, we build in failback procedures as well. So if we run into an issue that we can't overcome, we don't like to do it, but we will fail back if we have to and get your original environment back up and running. But we prefer to try to power through and overcome hurdles and have a successful outcome, even if it takes a little bit more work during that cutover window.
We are out of time. I think maybe close with a tip of the hat to our project management organization. I think you've heard a theme here. This slide in particular circles back to planning, and all of that is orchestrated by our PMO, our project management organization, to whom we're grateful for making these hundreds of migrations for thousands of VMs, as Darryl mentioned. Have a great proven track record of success for us. I think I'll advance once more to our prize slide. Remind everybody that you attend the virtual sessions, earn a chance to win a prize, and I think our moderators are gonna give us the hook here, and we'll close out the session. Thank you for attending.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you.